Well, good morning, everyone. Aloha. Aloha. All right, one more time. Aloha. Aloha. All right, thank you very much. Thanks, and thank you for joining us here on our final day of LANPAC. Today's general session is sponsored by Govini, and the fantastic breakfast that you enjoyed this morning was sponsored by World Fuel once again. Please join me in thanking our sponsors. This morning, I'm delighted to introduce to you Major General Sai Dusian, Chief of Army, Singapore Army, a leader at the forefront of Indo-Pacific security. From commanding the 3rd Singapore Division to his current role as Chief, Major General Sai has been a tireless advocate for agility, decisiveness, and multi-domain readiness. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm welcome for Major General Sai.
Thanks for the kind introduction. Well, if you saw General Brunson, General Clark, and I, you could be forgiven for thinking that to give a keynote at LANPAC, a certain hairstyle is required. I assure you, this wasn't the only thing I did to prepare for today's speech. General Kim and General King, thankfully, also disproved this theory. The General Robert Brown, President and CEO of AUSA, my fellow Army chiefs and friends from across the Indo-Pacific, ladies and gentlemen, aloha. Aloha. First of all, thank you to AUSA and to USAPAC for hosting such a wonderful event here in beautiful Hawaii. LANPAC has an unparalleled and growing ability to bring together leaders from across the Indo-Pacific, and it's always a great opportunity to meet up and to think collectively about the future of the land power network. This year's theme of prevailing through transformation and innovation is very timely. In an increasingly contested, uncertain, and dangerous world, it cannot be business as usual or more of the same. To stand a chance at prevailing in the next conflict, we must transform and innovate, not just once off, but continuously and enduringly. Failing to prevail is not an option, especially for the Singapore Army. Singapore is a city-state half the size of the island of Oahu, almost as large and almost as populated as New York City. We are located at the heart of one of the world's busiest maritime trade routes, and each one of these facts is a strategic vulnerability. City-states don't have a great track record of survival. Think of Athens, Sparta, Carthage, Venice. None of them exist today as independent states. Our lack of strategic depth makes Singapore a point target, and our reliance on free and open trade mean that we cannot decide to simply shut ourselves off from the world, nor completely control our own destiny. The Singapore Army must therefore be the final backstop to defend our country's sovereignty and independence. Our mission and our vision are clear, and they are enduring. To deter aggression, and should deterrence fail, to secure a swift and decisive victory over the aggressor. Of being ready in peace, decisive in war, and respected by all. But we need a guide to action. And so this morning I offer you 3 themes to spur your thinking about transformation. Being ready in peace demands that we are resilient. Can our soldiers and can our systems withstand adversity and disruption? More than that, can they emerge stronger? To be decisive in war, we must be dynamic. The ability to exploit emerging opportunities and to adapt at the speed of relevance. And to be respected by all, we need to be firmly rooted in the society we serve and in the partnerships that we forge. And this means engaging widely, deeply, and purposefully. These 3 themes inform our work in the Singapore Army, both in doing things better and in doing better things. And I hope you too will find them useful. Allow me to cover each of them in turn. By now, I think we are all sold on the critical importance of industrial capacity, of supply chain resilience, and the ability to generate combat power in a timely and sustained manner. As General Brunson put it in his keynote, sustainment is the teeth not the tail. Put another way, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. So here, let me start by talking about the two things that typically come at the end of any military talk: people and logistics. I'm going to start with them. Put another way, our soldiers and our systems. Because to be truly resilient, we need to excel at both. For the Singapore Army, resilience begins with our people. We need soldiers who are strong both physically and mentally. All the more so in an environment that is more complex and uncertain. We have therefore invested significantly in soldier performance. We set up the Center of Excellence for Soldier Performance in 2017, and we gave the center the task of making our soldiers fitter and more resilient. And since then, we have gone full steam with data-enabled training. We use wearable technologies and analytics to better understand soldier workloads, their recovery plans, and performance optimization. Every soldier enlisting into the Army today is issued with their own personal smartwatch. We have to analyze and aggregate the data to inform how we design our training. We have to also forward deploy physiotherapists to our combat units to provide more responsive care and to prevent injuries before they occur. We've also undertaken efforts to improve our soldiers' mental resilience. So rather than simply breaking them down and building them up in the traditional model, we worked with our psychologists to establish a science-based mental resilience program for all our recruits, arming them with techniques to better manage adversity and failure. Psychological resilience is a muscle that we need to develop, no different than the muscles we build to lift heavier or to run faster. We load our soldiers progressively, we check in with them periodically, and we calibrate. Apart from making our soldiers more resilient, we also want to maximize their potential. As warfare evolves, so too does the diversity of operational roles. Drone operators and intelligence analysts are just as much on the front lines as our infantry soldiers these days. And so, we had to recently update our medical classification system and our vocational deployment process to better reflect these emerging realities. This allows more of our soldiers to contribute meaningfully across a wider range of operational roles. Soldiers who are purposefully deployed and meaningfully engaged, regardless of their physical condition. To support our resilient soldiers, we need more resilient systems. As we become a more platform-centric army and induct new capabilities, we become increasingly dependent on complex supply chains, both physical and digital. And this creates new vulnerabilities. We first need to identify where the dependencies and the vulnerabilities are. And so we're investing in supply chain intelligence. We track hundreds of supply chains across spares, ammunition, even medical supplies. And we need to keep doing more to better forecast demand and then to build our stockpiling and our procurement strategy around it. What does this entail? We need to partner local industry to expand domestic manufacturing of ammunition and drones. We need to scale up the remanufacturing of spare parts. We also need to proliferate capabilities like additive manufacturing or 3D printing more widely and to make this a baseline capability. So rather than to wait years for spares to come, tactical units need the organic capability to print spares on demand, or even better, to modify their equipment out in the field to better suit their operational needs. As our army becomes more mobile, more digitalized, and more unmanned, an emerging area of resilience that we look at very closely in the Singapore Army is around power and energy. As these systems proliferate, we will all become increasingly dependent on batteries, charging infrastructure, energy storage, even distribution. In future conflicts, it is not an understatement, it's not an exaggeration to say that energy may become as operationally decisive as ammunition. We therefore need a strategy for energy resilience. Can we produce, can we stockpile, can we transmit enough energy to our frontline units so that they can sustain the fight? In the near term, we can field mature technologies like mobile microgrids, or seeding developments in emerging areas like hydrogen and methanol fuels, as well as novel storage and transmission solutions. I've spoken about how being ready requires us to be resilient. And the thought here is this: Warfare is a competition not just between militaries, but it's a competition between ecosystems. Can your ecosystem generate and sustain combat power reliably, consistently, over a protracted period, if required? Can your ecosystem train soldiers properly, both mentally and physically, and then deploy them in meaningful ways? How robust are your systems of sustainment, supply, production, even regeneration? Resilience is our ability to preempt, to withstand, and then to overcome disruptions, to ensure that our ecosystem can outlast that of our adversaries. The second theme I'll cover today is about being dynamic. Resilience allows us to overcome challenges, but we also need to seize opportunities. To be decisive in conflict and war, we must be dynamic. We are used to developing capabilities. Many of us in many armies are used to developing capabilities in a deliberate, methodical way. And to be clear, long-term planning continues to be essential. But it's no longer enough. The speed of transformation and the speed of obsolescence are accelerating. Emerging technologies evolve on a vastly different timeline. New variants appear in months, they're adapted in weeks, and they get replaced as quickly as threats evolve. Our armies must be able to handle both the deliberate development of capabilities and the agile iteration. In short, we need to be multi-speed armies. Unmanned systems is arguably the most important and urgent area to put this idea of the multi-speed army into practice. The proliferation of unmanned systems has fundamentally changed how armies see, sense, strike, and survive. And they are evolving extremely quickly. To drive the operationalization of unmanned capabilities in the Singapore Army, we recently set up the Unmanned Systems Command. Its mission is not merely to operate drones. Its mission is to accelerate adoption, to drive experimentation, and to challenge existing concepts of operations. Because the real disruption is not in the platforms themselves. These things become obsolete very quickly. They're commodities. More fundamentally, it's the change in mindset and organizational culture that is required to operationalize these capabilities effectively. So today, every new soldier in the Singapore Army undergoes drone training during their basic military training. And from this year onwards, we intend for every maneuver battalion in the Army to possess organic drone capabilities. We're also experimenting with new concepts for unmanned systems in logistics, in island defense, and in force protection. Importantly, we are asking ourselves not just how drones can support existing ConOps, but how they can fundamentally change them. Because transformation doesn't happen when new technologies are layered onto old thinking or old processes. Transformation happens when technologies force us to rethink our assumptions entirely. And this may be one of the most important leadership shifts required for modern armies, the need to cultivate a culture of continuous learning and an instinct to learn from any and every source, both internally and externally. No single military institution can innovate alone anymore. So we are working closely with industry, with startups, with universities, even with research institutes. Because the best ideas out there may come from a software engineer, it may come from a university lab, a startup founder, or even a young soldier who's experimenting at the tactical edge. The role of military leadership therefore changes. It becomes less about controlling innovation centrally and more about nurturing an environment where innovation can flourish anywhere and everywhere. Beyond building capabilities, our army needs to be consistently dynamic in training. As a peacetime army that is fundamentally based on a system of universal conscription, training is our lifeblood and it's a daily preoccupation for the Singapore Army. Every year, we enlist more than 15,000 fresh recruits. These are 19-year-old males, civilians who enter the military, and they don't enter by choice. Our army is therefore tasked with turning them into operationally ready soldiers in just 2 years, and then sustaining their readiness for another 10. The challenge compounds further when you consider the amount of space that military training requires and how land-scarce Singapore is. For Singapore, training innovation is not optional. And so we seek to maximize every training resource we have. We instrumentalize our training facilities so that we can maximize the training value that we can extract from a plot of land. The best example we have of this is the newly launched Safety City. It's not just an urban training facility. Every building, window, road, tunnel, and elevator is instrumented, it's modular. This not only makes training more realistic, but it allows trainers to better measure performance, to generate insights, feedback, and learning for better outcomes. Second, we are doing more of our training virtually through simulation. Overcoming physical limitations greatly enhances both training efficiency and effectiveness. Soldiers no longer have to wait their turn for a piece of equipment or a platform to become available. They can be put through more challenging scenarios that would not have been possible or would have been too resource-intensive in the physical world. For instance, to hone our soldiers' immediate action drills and safety instincts when they're faced with contingencies. I've spoken about how being decisive requires us to be dynamic. And here's the thought I want to leave you with on the second point: to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Some might assume that innovation and transformation are simply about adopting the latest technology and tools. They find a shiny new tool, and then they go about searching for a problem to solve. But that, to us, is just putting the cart before the horse. We must go deeper than that. Start with the problem. What's slowing us down? What's holding us back? What are the processes, the structures, the behaviors that must change? And then go looking for the solution with an open mind. It may be a technological solution, it may not. But let's be clear, this is not a technology challenge, it's a leadership one. The third and final theme I'll speak about today is the need to be rooted. Rooted in the society and the nation that we are part of, rooted in our relationships with friends and partners. The Singapore Army is at heart a citizen army. We literally draw strength from our society and our nation. Our combat power is directly derived from every able-bodied male citizen and second-generation permanent resident. In addition, our national servicemen, as we call our conscripts, are supported by their friends and their families and their employers, who give them the time and the space to serve. Our operational readiness therefore depends directly on the support, the trust, and the commitment of Singaporeans, and sustaining this model requires consistent effort. It's thus vitally important for our Army to be embedded in and to partner with all segments of society, so that each generation understands why defense matters and believes that their service is meaningful. That's why we work continuously to give our operationally ready national servicemen the most purposeful training experience possible, by increasing opportunities for new experiences like live firing, combined arms training, and overseas training, as well as operational standby duties. But being rooted also means engaging deeply with the wider community. We want to go upstream, meaning getting our units to partner with schools, to organize events in the community, to show them what the Army and what defense is all about. Our ambition is to partner with every single school in Singapore so that the Army's brand is a strong, positive one for all our youths. That's upstream. Going downstream, we are tightening our links with our alumni, people who have completed their service, but who, if we engage them well, can become strong advocates and ambassadors for our Army. We're also giving more opportunities for more groups in society to contribute to defense through the SAF Volunteer Corps. These are females, naturalized citizens who do not have an obligation of service in the way that we conscript. But, uniformed or not, they can contribute to our operations, and they do, in roles as diverse as physiotherapists, parachute riggers, and even security troopers in our camps and bases. But being rooted isn't just an internal matter. Armies must also be rooted externally in strong and lasting partnerships. As a small and open trading nation at the crossroads of global flows, Singapore well understands that our security and our prosperity are inseparable from the collective security of the wider Indo-Pacific. And so we have always been, and we will always be, a firm believer in and a supporter of collaboration and exchanges with like-minded partners. I'm proud to call many of you in this room my friends and my partners. We have deployed in operations with you. We train extensively overseas, including here in the United States. We participate actively in bilateral and multilateral exercises across our region and indeed across the world. We share best practices, we co-develop new capabilities, we test doctrine and TTPs. We recognize that no army can address emerging challenges alone because our region is simply too interconnected and the operational and strategic challenges are simply too complex. I think it will be clear to everyone in this room just how powerful and precious our land power network is. This Indo-Pacific community of armies, this LANPAC gathering, doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of years, decades even, of consistent, deliberate investment. Not just of time and treasure, but more importantly, of trust. General King, in her keynote yesterday, spoke about how important human connectivity and human relationships are, and I couldn't agree more. Trust is really the most powerful currency. It cannot be bought, it can only be earned. And even then, only with time and consistency. So let us stay rooted in our societies, rooted in our partnerships. Just as we draw strength from these connections, so too should we give strength to them. There's a saying that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And so to conclude, allow me to summarize the 3 themes I've covered today, because after all, the military mind can only handle 3 points at a time. First, we must be resilient in both our soldiers and our systems. War is not just a contest between militaries, it's a contest between ecosystems and who can sustain the fight better. Second, we must be dynamic, not just as a matter of technology, but as a matter of culture. Leaders must cultivate a culture of continuous learning and the instinct to encourage innovation from every source. And last, we must be rooted in the societies we are part of and with the partners and the friends that we nurture. We draw strength from and we give strength to these connections, and we earn trust every step of the way. As we collectively make this journey of transformation, the Singapore Army is very proud to be a part of this great network and to call all of you our friends. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Sir, thank you for being here. If it's okay, I'd like to ask the first question.
Sure.
You mentioned national service, which remains the foundation of Singapore's fourth-generation model. But the technology and cognitive demands of modern warfare are changing faster than a 2-year conscript cycle can absorb. How is the Singapore Armed Forces thinking about the tension between mass, which national service provides, and the depth of expertise that emerging warfighter domains require?
That's a great question, Amy. Thank you. I think first it's important to put our national service system into context, because many countries, many militaries practice conscription. They have the concept of the total force, where you have the active component, you have the reserves, you have the National Guard, the reserves in the US. For us, national service, to be absolutely clear, is not a reserve concept. It's front and center. These are frontline troops, raised, trained, and sustained into coherent, cohesive units. And so because of that, the way we organize and the way we run national service is with that goal in mind. It's not about building soldiers that you can then use to reinforce standing units. You need to build coherent command structures. National servicemen are led by their fellow national servicemen. You have battalion commanders, brigade commanders, division chiefs of staff, who are themselves national servicemen. And so that is the challenge for the Singapore Army, but it's also a tremendous opportunity. Because when you talk about breadth, it's not just the breadth of the units and the range of roles that they're placed in, but also the depth that we can go into, because many of these national servicemen, they serve not just for their statutory obligation for the 10 years that they're put into national service, but many of them serve well beyond that. They rise to very senior positions, and because of that, that allows us the depth of their experience, their expertise. In many cases, they stay longer in a particular unit than a regular professional soldier would, because they grew up in the unit, they're raised in that unit, they lead that unit, they retire with that unit. And so that's a very powerful concept that I think is quite unique in the Singapore context. But that said, I think the other point I'd like to add is that when we talk about the depth of expertise and the range of sensibilities that our national servicemen have, we think that's a great advantage for us. So when you think about emerging technologies like unmanned systems, like power and energy, artificial intelligence, in many cases, the state of the art doesn't reside internally within the military. In a lot of these cases, the cutting edge is actually out there. It's in the private sector, it's in industry, it's in startups. And so we think a lot about how we can tap on, optimize that opportunity by reaching out to our national servicemen who may themselves be startup founders, who may themselves be running multinational corporations. They're CEOs outside. They've got a great breadth of experience that we can leverage to make the Singapore Army stronger. That's, we think, a tremendous advantage. Thank you.
Hey, General Sy, sir, thank you again for your partnership as one of our strong allies in a very difficult region of the globe. Mick Bednarik, Fluor Corporation. I had to wrestle the microphone from Gavin Gardner here. We wanted to talk about supply chain logistics
Gavin's a good
all
friend.
day long.
He's been by Singapore a few times.
But, sir, you highlighted a lot of the themes in this conference has been transformation initiatives, artificial intelligence that you highlighted, and certainly people, and you zeroed in on that. But you also highlighted and took some time to talk about supply chain resilience, and particularly in your area where you are across the Pacific. What do you see as the toughest Achilles heel, the biggest challenge that you have of a supply chain and getting the capabilities that you need to maintain your readiness as a force, and how can our industry partners here help you? Sir, thanks.
Yep. Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir. It's a great question, something we think about a lot. I think the first and probably the most difficult thing to do is to gain awareness, first and foremost, right? For many of us, I think we've grown up in, or we've been used to a world and times where interconnection, globalization have just been the linear trend or the very secular trend over many decades. And now we're seeing a world where those truths or those realities are being challenged daily. And so I think the first order of business for us, at least in Singapore, is to gain a better handle, gain a better awareness of how our supply chains are mapped. Not just the first order suppliers, but the second order suppliers, the third order suppliers, the sub-suppliers and the subcontractors that feed into those supply chains. You need to have a much better visualization of that reality. And then that's where you go in and you understand, okay, where are the vulnerabilities, where are the single sources of failure, where are the fragilities that you then need to address. And so I think awareness is really the first order of business. The second is in maintaining a diversity of capabilities. And when I say this, I mean, and I think this is true not just of small countries like Singapore, but even large countries the world over, where to be completely autonomous, completely self-sufficient, for us is a pipe dream. It's absolutely impossible. We know that we need to stay connected. We know we need to stay open to the world. And so it's about maintaining a balance. On the one hand, building up our local and domestic capabilities to fulfill supply or to build up our local production and manufacturing capabilities. And we're doing so in areas like drones, for example, unmanned systems. But at the same time, we know that we're not going to fulfill 100% of demand just through domestic production. It's not possible. And therefore, having a diversity of suppliers, diversity of sources becomes absolutely essential. You want to be able to balance and kind of alternate and spread across both the domestic capability as well as the international partnerships. And that's why the partnerships are so important. Not just partnerships between militaries, but partnerships between militaries and industries in some cases. Yeah. But thank you for the question.
Hi, good morning, sir.
Hi.
Thank you for that answer, because it actually tied into, I wanted to question, my question is, so you mentioned about AI and those partnerships. how is the Singapore Army working to maintain or improve the level of readiness in terms of interoperability with the U.S. Armed Forces?
Thank you. I mean, it's a great question. And I think this idea of interoperability, it's both, and General King talked about this, I think, a fair bit during her keynote, right, where you can have interoperability of systems, C4, connectivity, radios, and all that. But more fundamentally, it's the connectivity among forces, right? And I mean this not just at the senior levels. I mean, we can all get together in a room. We've got great chats among the chiefs. We've built up, I think, a very strong network of partners and friends. But that idea of interoperability, I think, extends far beyond that. It's at all levels, right? It's at the NCO level, and that's why I really appreciate the opportunity. And I think it was a great idea that USAPAC put together the Readiness Challenge, and that was a great opportunity for, at the NCO level, to exchange TTPs, to talk about the way they do basics like clearing obstacles, like tactical shooting. But it's also at the junior officer level, and this is where friendships are forged. This is where the partnerships really start to come together. I think it's at multiple levels. So that's the first thing I would say. The second, I think, is the value and the distinct value of both bilateral and multilateral exercises and partnerships. And I think both play a complementary role. Bilateral partnerships, I think, are very important. Bilateral exercises have a tremendous value because they allow partners and friends to go very deep into specific capability areas, into specific operating concepts. Multilateral partnerships, we believe, are very valuable for a distinct reason, and that's to showcase and to bring together a larger family, a larger network, a larger community of friends, right? The ability to interoperate amongst a larger group. And that is where you go very broad. So the ability to go deep with bilateral partnerships, but the ability also to go broad with multilateral arrangements, I think, is what makes something like the Land Power Network, like the Indo-Pacific community, so interesting and so full of potential, because it's both. It's both bilateral depth and multilateral breadth.
Sir, thank you so much for being here. Please give General Tsai a big round of applause.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Major General Tsai, for that insightful presentation, sir. Thank you. We turn our attention to the total force. Total force concept with our next panel. It takes all of us, how regular, reserve, and guard forces are adapting to the contemporary environment. This section explores how we synchronize our diverse strengths to meet modern threats. We are delighted to have Major General Lance Akamura leading this conversation. Major General Akamura is a Deputy Commanding General for U.S. Army Pacific Homeland Affairs. He is a dual-track military police and strategic intelligence officer, as well as a certified nuclear counter-proliferation officer, sir, which sounds really smart. Among many other assignments, he has served in operations Provide Refuge, Joint Guardian, Enduring Freedom, and Noble Eagle. A distinguished military graduate from Brigham Young University, a graduate of Syracuse University, he has 3 MS degrees from Columbus University, the National Intelligence University, and the U.S. Army War College. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that very overinflated introduction, sir. Thank you very much. Please have a seat. Ladies and gentlemen of the land forces of the Pacific, good morning and aloha. Aloha. Welcome to our panel, right, entitled It Takes All of Us, How Regular Forces, Reserve Forces are Responding to Crisis and Adapting to a Contemporary Environment. But first and foremost, hats off to AUSA and to all the intelligence professionals in this ballroom, because I will share with you, having served a large portion of my career in the intelligence community, I will share with you that AUSA and all of you have set the perfect conditions for successful interrogation of our panel members this morning, right? And you ask, what are you talking about, Lance? Well, first and foremost, AUSA says the requirement for us to be part of this panel is to be dressed in the most stiffest, warmest, uncomfortable uniform in the tropics of Hawaii. Conditions number 2, we're going to turn up the heat by filling this ballroom with more people and turning down the air condition. As you notice, as our panel members approached on the stage, they begin to have a sweat on their brow and trickling down on their sideburns. Conditions number 3, as you can tell, you're spreading out these very bright heat lamps directly in our faces so that we are completely blinded and disoriented as we try to answer to all your questions today. And then number 4, Lance, you have 10 ounces of water for your panel members. Good luck as you sweat through the next 35 to 40 minutes for this panel. And more importantly, General Clark, condition number 5, General Clark, we had the opportunity to talk and shake hands. And the first thing he says, with a smile, he says, good luck. But what many of you don't know is General Clark has this talent for what we call Ranger telepathy, as he delivers a message into your mind. And then in his message to me this morning, as we were approaching the stage, he made it very clear. He said, Lance, you and panel number 5 are standing in between me and my ability to deliver a very outstanding keynote address to the audience this morning. So no pressure, but don't mess this up. And we call that cognitive dissonance, right, to keep the adversary off balance as we try to answer the questions this morning. But thank you very much for your patience. Thank you for being present here this morning. And more importantly, thank you for the panel members. The theme for LANPAC has been described as prevailing through transformation and innovation. And that's exactly what this panel is all about, right? There is no other pursuit, no other area that is more relevant than the opportunity to train, organize, and employ the total Army, to be able to employ the total force. And what do you mean by that, Lance? Over the last 2 days, you've had the opportunity to understand the multinational approach, with over 24 nations here, working side by side with our allies and partners to solve problems in the Pacific region. You've also had the opportunity to hear from Admiral Paparo, right? A Navy admiral who totally agrees and always propagates the thought that it takes the joint force. It takes a multi-service approach to respond to crisis in the Pacific region. What is not often discussed or presented is the multi-compo requirement to deal with the set of problems, the set of issues in the Indo-Pacific region. U.S. Army Pacific, over 107,000 soldiers assigned to the theater army. That is over 1/4 of the United States Army, the largest theater army for the United States Army. But General Clark will openly admit, General Clark, who actually served under a National Guard officer by the name of Gronick, all right, from the Pennsylvania National Guard, he will openly admit to you today that he cannot do it all by himself, even with over 1/4 of the United States Army in the Pacific. He cannot respond to crisis. He cannot actively and effectively campaign and deter. He cannot defend the homeland without the full complement of the United States Army Reserve and the National Guard. But the total force is not just a United States national concept, right? In the Pacific, it must be a multinational endeavor. Land power in the Pacific requires an interoperable network of regular, reserve, and National Guard across all allies and partners in the region. So whether we're responding to a natural disaster, or more importantly, projecting combat power to deter aggression, our success depends on our ability to leverage the strength of each service component. So that's what we have here this morning. We have representatives from our allies and partners, but more importantly, from all the full complement of the reserve, conscripts, militia, whatever you would like to discuss this morning. To my right, I would like to introduce to you a gentleman by the name of General Stephen Logan. He represents the National Guard. He is the Adjutant General for the state of Hawaii. What's very interesting about Steve is he's not only the Adjutant General for the state of Hawaii, he is also the Director for Emergency Management. And number 3, if I'm not mistaken, he also at one point served as the Homeland Security Advisor for the Governor for the state of Hawaii. So 3 duty assignments, but only 1 salary. The other interesting piece about Steve, if you research his history, is he has a distinguished career in the National Guard as an aviator. What is not known a lot about Steve is that on his civilian career, he had a long, veteran, distinguished career serving with the Honolulu Police Department. And guess what he did in the Honolulu Police Department? He flew helicopters. So his civilian career clearly translated into his success in the National Guard. To his right, we have the opportunity to hear from a good friend by the name of Brigadier General Mark Mark Armstrong, right? What is unknown is that, yes, there is the first Australian division in Australia. However, there's also a second Australian division. And what's really interesting is that this division is responsible for defending Australia and total integration of the theater mission in accordance with the Australian National Defence Strategy. In his civilian career, Mark also serves as the head of Queensland's State Emergency Service, comprised of 200 employees, but 5,500 volunteers who are responsible for responding to natural disasters throughout Australia. Interesting enough, Mark is also a doctor. He has a PhD. He wrote this one thesis, which is very interesting reading. I would recommend anyone in this audience to look at it. It's called One or Two Armies, Relevant or Not, The Analytical History Since 1999. So I highly recommend you take a look at that. To his right, we have the opportunity to hear from Brigadier General Catherine Tremblay. We here in the Theater Army are very privileged to have a reserve component theater enabling command assigned to this theater army, which is very fortunate for us. For those of you who understand the reserves, right, the preponderance of our sustainment, protection, intelligence resides in the U.S. Army Reserve. So she has that privilege of overseeing the reserve formations and soldiers in the Pacific Theater. What's also unknown about Catherine is that she wears a second hat, right? She's our Deputy Commanding General for Mobilization. Why is that so important? Well, we can't talk about winning the war if we can't get to the fight. And so Catherine has that immense responsibility to overlook that process. And finally, to her right, we have my new friend, what a panyo, ni hao, is Colonel Dean Yik. He is the head of National Service Affairs from the Singapore Army. And of course, you just heard General Tsai talk about that, right? World-class national service model for all of us to follow. What's interesting for a lot of individuals, to include General Tsai, is that prior to me joining the Army, a lot of people think that my father was instrumental in me in joining the Army. What is unknown is that I served for 2 years. I had a chance to live for 2.5 years in Singapore. And my exposure to national service is what prompted me, influenced me, and motivated me to actually join the United States Army upon my return to the United States. So ladies and gentlemen, this is our panel members. I highly encourage all of you to take full advantage of their expertise and asking them as many questions as possible. But I get to start off this opportunity with the first and easiest question for this panel, starting from Steve, working all the way down to Dean. Ladies and gentlemen, I just need for you to articulate to the audience, why are you, and when I say you, why are you personally, and more importantly, why is your organization so important to national security and global peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific theater? So if you don't mind, Steve, we'll start with you.
Oh, thanks, Lance. Thanks for that question. And you're not lying. The lights are pretty bright up here. Always hard to talk after Lance talks because he's so polished and articulate. But, I'll talk a little bit about the role of the National Guard and the role of the National Guard here within the state of Hawaii and the greater Indo-Pacific. A lot of people don't really truly understand what an adjutant general does, but I'm appointed by the governor. I sit on his cabinet. I'm the commander of the Hawaii National Guard. We talked about my emergency management roles. And there's a distinct responsibility there. Just yesterday, I sat at the governor's table during his cabinet meeting, and every Thursday I sit with Admiral Paparo at Indo-PACOM during his update briefings. So I get a very good picture of what's going on within the state, within the counties, and within the Indo-PACOM AOR as a whole. The complexities that are facing the world today require a very joint and integrated approach. And what we used to focus on with the National Guard was our federal mission, which was to fight and win America's wars in either the Army or the air domains, or secondarily was to prepare for any kind of natural disaster. Well, right now what we're focusing on is the consequence management piece of a natural disaster, but applied to a non-natural disaster, or something that might resemble homeland defense. And so we regularly integrate with USERPAC and the TJ Flick to make sure that we can be that integrated partner. I'm predominantly a part-time workforce, so maybe about 28% full-time, about 72% part-time soldiers and airmen that have jobs on the outside. They're either policemen, they teach in schools, a variety of different skill sets. And so they bring that skill when necessary, but they have to be mobilized, they have to be activated, and of course they have to be trained. And so our uniqueness is this relationship we have. In Hawaii, we have 4 counties. This is one county, the city and county of Honolulu, with a mayor, police force, a police chief, a fire chief, emergency management, and of course, ambulance and healthcare support. Just recently, we had the Konolo storms that struck a variety of aspects of the state. A lot of flooding here, a lot of displaced personnel, and we were able to activate and respond to that. And it's that relationship that we built at the county level that enabled us to be truly responsive, not to overuse that word. In order to be responsive, we have to be able to anticipate needs, posture, organize, train, and equip accordingly, and we have to develop that trust, much like what was brought up with our opening remarks today. And then we're able to convey that throughout the federal system into the greater active Army or Indo-PACOM itself. So I think that's where our greatest strength here within the state of Hawaii.
Thanks, Steve.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for the invite, and thank you to the organisers for including such an important topic. I represent the 2nd Division. I'm the Deputy Commander of that division. As brief, there's 2 infantry heavy warfighting divisions in the Australian Army. The 1st Australian Division is a regular Army dominant and has the role of expeditionary operations. The 2nd Australian Division is reserve predominant and has that worthy and important mission of homeland defence as our main effort. The 2nd Division consists of around 10,000 soldiers who are located right around the Australian mainland. There's about 120 different locations from which we train and are prepared to stage operations from. The Army Reserve, like our Army as a whole, has been undergoing a series of evolutions. Prior to 2000, the Australian Army Reserve was essentially a Cold War strategic reserve. It was hollow. It was essentially a separate entity in many ways, and it was under-resourced. Through the 2000s, the Army Reserve evolved into an operational reserve, one that could provide individuals and teams to support our expeditionary operations overseas in the Middle East and the Pacific, whilst the ADF was heavily committed to those theatres. More recently, we've evolved again to be an operational reserve, but one that is operating in a divisional or a joint task force structure and optimised for homeland defence. That homeland defence mission is a challenging one. We've got vast distances across the Australian mainland. We have the nature of the threat is a challenging one. We have remote and isolated communities and infrastructure, critical infrastructure, that will be tasked to protect or support the protection of. We are also expected to be able to support and enable other things happening through that AO in a wartime scenario, including supporting and enabling integrated air defence, supporting and enabling logistics operations, supporting and enabling long-range precision fires, and also supporting and enabling within means the coalition and allied forces that are likely to be transitioning through the northern areas and possibly fighting from bases in the northern areas of Australia. That's quite a challenge for my organisation and our 10,000 reservists. To do that, we've been evolving and we're seeking to take advantage of or develop home ground advantage from living and being present in our communities. We seek to leverage the skills and within our reserve workforce, which come from all walks of society, and importantly have key relationships with our local, state, federal government, with industry, and with our communities, particularly in the far north of the state. So we've had a series of initiatives in order to further that, to develop that home ground advantage so we can fight and win that next war.
Sir, thank you for the opportunity to sit the panel today. For the 9th MSC, I'd like to highlight its role supporting the Theater Army, which I think is very unique for an Army Reserve Command. We are the only one-star command that is theater assigned to USRPAC, and that gives us the ability to provide critical capabilities in both the 1st and 2nd island chain. And when I say we're in the first and second island chain, I mean that my soldiers actually live and work in places like Hawaii, American Samoa, Guam, Saipan, Japan, Korea, Alaska, and also I have formation in JBLM. And not only that, but my reserve centers are forward. So that means when the Theater Army needs critical capabilities that the Theater Enabling Command, the 9th MSE, can provide, they are already forward. I don't need to get them from CONUS. I don't need to coordinate transportation. We can respond immediately and provide support to the Theater Army when we're called. And I believe, that's the critical enabling quality that the 9th MSE brings to the Theater Army to be able to fight. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, sir. Thank you for the invitation for us to be here to share the Singapore perspective. I support the Chief of Army in the design and implementation of national service policies. He's covered most of the main points, but I'll elaborate on a few themes. Firstly, size. So Singapore is really small, total resident citizen population of just above 4 million, 700 square kilometers in size. So we don't have the people and the luxury of time to have a large regular army. So therefore, our founding leaders decided to implement universal conscription in 1967, 2 years after we gained independence. This allowed us to raise a citizen army. And we do this in two main parts. We spoke about 2 years of full-time conscription. This allows us to bring in regular servicemen, train him to basic and battalion competency. At the end of the 2 years, we assign them to operational units. And they transit to what we call operationally ready national service. And they continue to serve with us for the next 10 years. We call these soldiers back once a year for up to 2 weeks to update them on their skills, to evaluate them on their competencies, and we also place them on mobilization manning throughout these 10 years. So this allows us to have a rather large army sustained by the citizens.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. In my research with Dex and Dean here, I learned that over 95% of the defense force resides in their conscription, right? So the only 5% of the Army is active component. So the idea of this national service that has been expounded upon over the last half an hour is extremely important. Knowing full well, I thought in the United States Army, knowing full well that the United States Army, over 52-53% of it resides in the reserve component. I thought that was pretty significant until I visited Singapore, knowing 95% of their armed forces reside in the conscription, or we would often confer as the reserve component forces. Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, was a softball question to our panel members. We're going to start getting more difficult in some of these, but more importantly, I've heard the term Homeland Defense mentioned several times here from our panel members. So I'm going to throw the first complex question to you, Steve. Knowing full well that we have a national defense strategy that addresses Homeland Defense. So the question for you, Steve, is in a complex Homeland Defense environment, how does the National Guard leverage its unique command structures and relationships to effectively protect the state of Hawaii, the homeland, but while simultaneously supporting Admiral Paparo and Indo-Pacific Command's strategic posture?
Thank you, Lance. That's a good question. So let me just clarify that the Hawaii National Guard is made up of both Army and Air Forces. Our Pacific Air Forces are what we call integrated into PACAF or that command structure with the types of aircraft that they operate. Some of them are what we call TFI, or Total Force Integration, in which they train regularly, and some are standalone, like our tanker units. On the Army side, we have an Infantry Brigade Combat Team, which is very similar to what the 25th Infantry Division has. What we've been experimenting with most recently is what is the best command structure to be able to respond to the complexities in a homeland defense or crisis or conflict scenario. And if you go back in time to the early 2000s, where there was a massive hurricane down in the southeast United States called Hurricane Katrina, what came out of that was a concept called the dual status commander construct. And it was and the impetus was to create not so much unity of command, but unity of effort between dissimilar type units. And as you may or may not know, under United States Code Title 32, that's the authority by which the National Guard operates. And United States Code Title 10 is what the active component forces operate under. Under this dual status command construct, we're able to put an officer in charge that has special authorities, and they're able to command both of those structures for what we call unity of effort. Most recently, we've done that during the 2023 Maui wildland fires, where we had just had our major National Guard unit come back from a combat training center rotation. A lot of our equipment was still coming back on rail from Louisiana. So we were able to do that in Maui and effectively bring that together. One of the benefits is that through what we call the Emergency Management Assistance Compact Program, a National Guard unit can request for assistance, or the governor can request for assistance from all 53 other states and territories. And so it gives a broader breadth of capability that we may not have or may not reside here. With that dual status command construct, it opens the aperture up even further. Through the Title 10 portion, the active component forces, or portion through Indo-PACOM, we can access some of the capabilities that are here or can be brought here. So it really gives us a better dynamic on what we're able to do. The authorities don't currently exist. We have exercised this throughout some of the ELITE exercise programs that have been here, like Pacific Sentry and Keen Edge. And we're looking to really build this out in another exercise in 2027 called Vigilant Guard. So we were very fortunate to be able to bring that here and coalesce it and align it to some of the exercise programs that have already been, put together. One of the critical things that we do, and I don't mean to use that word too often, but it's the critical infrastructure that resides outside of the federal fence line or establishment. So as you see, Hawaii is an archipelagic construct. We're geographically separated from the continental United States, much like many of our neighbors out here in the Indo-Pacific. And it requires us to have a resiliency or a rapid response capability, because in all likelihood, assistance and supplementary assets may not be quick to come here. And the federal government comprises these critical infrastructure assets into 16 sectors, of which 13 are probably applicable to Hawaii. And the top 5, of course, are the ones that we focus on, which is energy, transportation, communications, water, and wastewater management. Any interruption in any of those, although being predominantly run by private or state entities outside of the federal government infrastructure, will have deep impacts inside the structure. So this ability to work together under that dual status commander construct can enable confidence that if it's being secured, if it's being protected, if it's continuing to operate for a longer period of time, that we won't see an impact to maybe a mission set that Indo-PACOM, the TJ Flick, America's Theater Army, or PACOF, or any of the other service components would have to perform in that scenario.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Now I'm going to turn over to Mark here, knowing full well that you've made it very clear one of the roles and responsibilities of Second Div is defending the homeland. So I want you to put on your PhD doctor hat now, because I want to ask you a really tough question, right? Knowing full well with the emphasis on discussing evolving threats on the homeland, right? Whether it's population polarity, disparate influence, and information operations. The question really is, how can the reserve forces evolve to address the developments in homeland security contexts?
Thanks for the question. So, the threat is, how we define the threat is an important one. And as we prepare our soldiers and officers, the threat is unlikely to be enemy soldiers arriving in landing craft to our homeland. The threat will come to us in the grey zone. It'll come to us in unexpected and novel ways. It'll come at us quickly and with many things happening at the same time. That's the environment that we need to be prepared to operate in and prevail in. So how do we prepare our people for that is an important one. And what's been really powerful for the 2nd Division is that we now have a very clear mission, that Homeland Defence mission. It's an important and worthy one. And associated with that is the idea of rehearsal. And we've talked about, we've heard about rehearsal a lot during the preceding sessions in this conference. For us in the 2nd Division, that rehearsal is every training activity. It's every time our forces leave one of our depots or bases. We're in our area of operations. We're rehearsing for that eventuality. In terms of preparation, it's not only what we own in the division, it's how we leverage the capabilities that will be present in our area of operations, including the civilian law enforcement, including the civilian industry and corporations. How do we have the relationships, the understanding and the trust with those that we can facilitate, enable, enhance what they're doing and operate in a way that we're cooperating and not trying to do it all ourselves, so that those relationships become really critical. And an advantage of our workforce is that many of our people also work in those organisations. So yeah, we're not alone, we're not just the Army team, we're the whole of nation team in this endeavour.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I'm going to transition over to Catherine, right? And I think one of the interesting things that General Tromley had brought up is that her span of control for the 9th Mission Support Command throughout the Pacific is vast and wide and quite large, right? From Hawaii to American Samoa, all the way to Guam and the first island change. That's quite a responsibility. So the question for you, Catherine, is what actions are you and the 9th MSC taking to keep pace with the Army's transformation initiatives?
Thank you, sir. So the 9th MSC, we'd like to believe we're running parallel as best as we can. And with that, I mean that we had to do a deep dive into all my direct reporting units and look at their force structure. We don't, some of my formations are 101 formation in the Army Reserve, meaning that they don't go through the natural progression of the force management cycle to go through an update. And so what that means is I have legacy structure within the 9th MSC that could potentially be maybe 10 years old. With the recent events of the 9th MSC being a sign to the theater Army, we now have to take a more operational look at the theater and how do we contribute key capabilities to the theater and where do those key capabilities lie. So all of my formations have been going through CMP, change management plan actions, to look at just even getting the structure right. And then once we get the spaces right, then we have to then look at what's the equipment looking like and how do we modernize and get into like the NAGRIA venues where we can ask Congress for additional money that's not coming from big Army to help the reserve component get up to par in modernization efforts. And most of these changes, unfortunately, they're going into TAA 2933 actions. So it's still an evolution, but we lean forward and we are doing the best with the full-time support that we have, placing them in positions and giving them those roles and responsibilities to start actioning now. And then, one of the things that we can talk about today, because it was a previous MTO change, is the legacy hospital unit. So my 1984th, which is a TDA backfilling tripler hospital, is now in the process of evolving to 3 MTO formations and 3 TDA formations that we think will better fit the critical care that's needed in the theater. Thank you for the question, sir.
Thanks. For you, Dean, your Chief of Army literally took 30 minutes to elaborate on how you're best organized and trained, right, to be ready to respond. So my question for you is, understanding that the Singapore Army is primarily a conscript army, how is the Singapore Army organized to mitigate the challenges posed by today's contemporary operating environment?
So, thank you for the question, sir. So I spoke briefly about how we generate the units. So 2 years of active training, 10 years as operational units, coming back once a year. And this is supported by a very, very strong and robust training system. We have what we call training institutes across the Army. I'll use infantry as an example. The Infantry Training Institute is responsible for type and task training for all infantry units. So he is able to see the unit through the 2+10 and understand where his gaps and design training to help close those gaps. He is also able to look across all infantry units and help ensure consistent standard across all our units. So this allows us to, over the 12 years, help to improve each and every unit so that they can maintain a very high level of operational readiness. My boss spoke briefly about this as well. So we have our units all led by national servicemen. So the unit commander, the company commander, the platoon leader, the section leader, they're all national servicemen, and they follow the unit through the 2 + 10 years. So it's a lot easier. The trust and the morale is there. It's a lot easier for the soldiers and the commanders to come back, jump right into it, and fulfill the training and the mission outcome.
Thanks, Dean. I appreciate that response. I'm sure your boss is grading you on your response right now to make sure you're following policy. Hey, real quickly, Ash Collinburn yesterday during the campaigning panel made it very clear that one of the ways we succeed in campaigning is persistent presence, right, in the theater. One of the great things I have learned in my career here is this thing called the State Partnership Program that the National Guard implements throughout the globe. And that enables actual persistent presence and continued relationships with partner nations. So I'm going to pose my question now to you, Steve. Right? How has the National Guard cultivated its robust state partnership program with the Philippines and Indonesia? And what are the key priorities that makes these partnerships a model for security cooperation in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, thank you. So as stated, we have a state partnership program relationship with both the Republic of the Philippines and Indonesia. The Philippines is our longest running state partnership program within the Indo-PACOM AOR. We just celebrated its 25th anniversary, and we share that partnership with Guam. And you cannot misunderstand or misstate or understate the geographic proximity that Guam has to the Philippines, and also the Filipino-American construct that's in both Guam and the state of Hawaii. So that partnership grows rather quickly. It turns into the trust that I talked about on the previous question, and that interoperability. And it's not a one-way street. We actually learn from each other on a variety of different planes. I'll give you one example specific to the Philippines. Is they purchased a new type of aircraft, a Sikorsky Black Hawk variant, which is the S-70I. We think it's very positive, gives them a lot of greater capability. It resides under the Philippine Air Force, not the Army, so a little bit different from how the Army does business. And that maintenance package that they purchased, we helped to accelerate that because we had flown the variant of the Black Hawk from the A to the L to the M, multiple deployments and applications to disasters and wildland firefighting and stuff like that. So we were able to streamline some of the civilian maintenance manuals that were purchased, and then shown them some best practices, demonstrated some wildfire fighting techniques, loaned them some slings, and they were able to implement that quite rapidly with a wildland fire that occurred in this area near Manila Bay. But it's not a one-way street because they've been flying helicopters as long as we have, different variants. And so we just now recently started commingling our crews to kind of share that expertise that they have with us. And we're looking to expand that program even further. In the Philippines, they have a very large reserve component force also. And so we do a lot of engagements or OAIs with the reserve component, but also with the active component. And kind of the goal that we have right now is, I talked a little bit about our Infantry Brigade Combat Team and its relationship. It has a training relationship with a National Guard division, but because the 25th Division is right here on this island, we cannot ignore that capability, and to be able to inculcate that into an exercise on the Philippines, and that's already set for future year execution. But we also work with their active component forces. Now, for Indonesia, we're going to be, in fact, I'm going to fly out next month, and we're going to celebrate the 20-year anniversary. So it's been a good 2 decades that we've been working with the Indonesian forces. We're trying to stress to them the whole of government approach. I talked a little bit about Hawaii being the archipelagic construct, so island state, broken up, geographically separated. In orders of magnitude, we're very small compared to the 7,000 islands in the Philippines and the hundreds, or if not thousands, of islands within Indonesia. What we share is a common threat pattern, though. Wildland fires, all three. Typhoons, tropical cyclones or hurricanes, all of that. Earthquakes, volcanic activity. We actually activated that dual status command authority in 2018 when Kilauea was erupting, and we're currently monitoring episode 47, which is occurring as we speak. And then, of course, no lack of the other similar natural disasters. And then we do an annual exercise with Indonesia called Super Gruta Shield, and we play a role in that, but it's really all over the country, and it's not just the National Guard, it's active component forces. Most recently, to be more prepared for hurricanes and tropical cyclones here, we do an annual exercise called Makani Pahili. And so the civilian variants for both the Philippines and Indonesia, their FEMA-like structures, civil defense and BNPB, came and participated in that exercise, and we're going to send some folks to then go during Super Gruta Shield and build that out even further in the effort to bring it into that Vigilant Guard exercise in 2027. Also in Indonesia, we have an air refueling squadron here with the Hawaii Air National Guard, and we were able to afford them the certifications by which they can now aerially refuel themselves and also allies and partners to help them in that region. So, you know, from natural disaster, civ to civ, to building out their military mill to mill, I think the state partnership program is vast. And it's not just us. There's about 10 other states within the continental United States that have, I believe, 14 or 15 partners out here, and they do the exact same thing. So that ability, because we know we can't do it all alone, it requires our allies and partners to be just as effective and be able to have that joint interoperability that we're all seeking. So very, very proud of that program.
You know, Mark, Steve brought up the topic of firefighting. And knowing full well I met your boss, Matt, although he's the commanding general for second Div, he's also a firefighter, right? So he's a major component of emergency response in Australia. So my question for you is, what is the most effective way to mobilize a reserve force in times of crisis and contingency, noting that many reservists also occupy key roles in agencies or professions vital to national state-based security responses like firefighting and police?
Yeah, no, it's an important question, and it's one that often comes up in the mobilisation discussions. I would offer it tends to get brought up in the negative, like it's a bad thing that that individual might be unavailable for the full-time military service is a net negative. I'd just like to switch that around a bit. I'd just like to offer, I think it can be a net positive. Those reservists that have those important roles in the civilian world, particularly emergency response, they have that deep knowledge and connection, that deep understanding that benefits defence or benefits Army every day, right up until that conflict. So, it really goes to that relationship part in our preparations and rehearsals. In the event there is a mobilisation, yes, some of those will be required for essential services. And in the 2nd Division, we plan for that. We allow for that. We allow planning estimates for what that effect might be so that we account for it. But I'd offer even on mobilisation, that benefit of having our reservists in those important positions continues to benefit even after mobilisation, because they'll have a deep understanding of what the military is seeking to do in that event of war and conflict. The other part is that they're also likely to be able to continue their part-time service so that they'll continue to provide a benefit. So I think on balance there is a net benefit. We just need to allow for it.
Well, you brought up a really big topic with regards to the challenges of mobilization. So I'm going to turn to Catherine, who oversees our mobilization process, right? And so for you, Catherine, what is the 9th MSC's view on mobilization in the Indo-Pacific? And what is the command doing to deliver capabilities at the point of need?
Thank you, sir. So the 9th MSC sees the key element is speed is everything. As I mentioned, we are forward already in the theater. And so we look at the problem set as how do we mobilize efficiently and effectively and communicate to the commanding general what risk he will assume when he mobilizes the reserve formations in the theater. So with that, we looked at what are the absolute priorities that we need to do as a reserve formation, and that's SRP 1 and 2, weapons qualification, and getting our external evaluations. And that gives the commanding general a good look at what he's going to turn on in terms of a Compo 3 asset to be put into the fight or to be put in for Homeland Defense or DISCA, whatever the mission set would be required for the 9th MSE. And then being, as you mentioned, sir, the DCG MOB for the theater is just really understanding the uniqueness that comes with being geographically dispersed, not having the luxury of being CONUS with all the MFGIs, the First Army support, the typical mobilization support forces that we are all accustomed to. Our problem set is very different. And so we look at partnering, at each location, what do we have there from the Navy, the Air Force, or from within our own formation to be able to get the medical, dental, to get these simple kind of administrative tasks done, and then partnering with 196 Infantry to make sure as we participate in pathways rehearsals that we do this, it's for real. They take their equipment, they're getting an ex-eval, and we're not just doing this as a training to standard type of motion for the 9th MSE. So we take consolidated weapons ranges. We've prioritized that within the formation, that we're not just tasking the one little det in American Samoa to go do this on their own. We're consolidating at the headquarters and prioritizing funding to get those training sets all met at the headquarters level and prioritizing funding to do that. Thank you for the question, sir.
So if you notice, between Steve, Mark, and Catherine, they've alluded to the fact that it takes a whole of Army and whole of government approach to be successful in this topic of being able to provide persistent presence and to be able to respond quickly to need. So this is going to be a great question for you, Dean, right? Because it's not just the whole of government. You guys have brought it up numerous times. It takes the whole of society. So my question for you is, conscription requires tremendous support and commitment from the community within the country. How does the Singapore Army gather and sustain political and societal support?
So when we implement national service, we are guided by 3 principles. 1, for critical need, defense and security only. 2, conscription must be universal. So the exemption rates in Singapore are really low. 95, 97% of people are enlisted every year. And 3rd, conscription must be equal, meaning everybody, regardless of your race, religion, socioeconomic background, must serve the same. So the principles help regular Singaporeans understand why they need to serve, because everybody does it. It's a way of life. There's a saying that if you gather a bunch of Singaporean men in a room, they may not know each other, but they will always talk about 2 things, food and national service. So it helps. But that being said, we recognize that it is very important for us to continue to get support, not just from our servicemen, but also from community at large. So we do 2 things. So for the first part, making sure that our servicemen undergo efficient, effective, and purposeful training. In the last few years, we have undergone tremendous digital transformation for NS processes to make sure that we only call people back for the amount of time that we need them, and that the time with us is gainfully employed. On the other end, to engage with society at large, we have gotten our units to go out there. We work a lot with the schools. My chief spoke about having a unit tagged to every single school. We get our national service units to go down to do school engagement as well. Every year during National Day, we invite all primary 5 kids, the entire cohort of Singaporean children comes in to attend National Day, and a unit is assigned to them to explain to them why we serve and why they need to serve. And this works both ways. It helps to explain to the students why they need to serve. It also makes the national servicemen feel good and feel proud about what they do. We run a lot of family day activities. We invite parents for enlistment. They get to visit the camp. They get to visit the barracks. We invite them for graduations and all the milestone events that the national serviceman goes through when he serves. So we always say when a guy serves national service in Singapore, his whole family serves together with him.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have in my hand about 32 cards from all of you, and I have less than 10 minutes to try and address all of them. So I'll be honest, I'm going to try and choose those questions that I think provide the biggest bang for the buck for all of you here this morning. And so this question is most applicable for every single one of you, knowing full well you represent the National Guard, Australian Reserve, the U.S. Army Reserve, and obviously National Service. And so this is going to be a tough one. I love it. It all has to do with this concept of multi-domain operations, right, which is the premier way we're now thinking about how do we succeed in the Indo-Pacific theater. So starting with you, Dean, I'm going to start with you, and we'll work our way back here, right? What is your top priority for implementing multi-domain operations within the reserves or conscripts over the next 18 months?
Okay, I must caveat this by saying that I'm not really responsible for the operational outcome of the training.
Yeah.
But how we do it is that whenever a new operational concept is introduced in the Army, it goes back to the fundamental training system. The commander trader of the day decides that this is an important enough capability that the Army needs to have, and we design it into 1-2 week blocks so that it can be quickly introduced into the in-camp training cycle. I spoke earlier about getting our units back every year for 1 to 2 weeks. So this touch point allows us to introduce new capabilities to the units. It may not happen over one in-camp training, but over the course of 2-3 years, we will be able to get a unit to 2-3 touch points so that they can bring on board some of these capabilities.
For the 9th MSC, as I mentioned, we're doing CMP actions. We're looking at the structure. For us, we believe that the 9th MSC headquarters, being a TDA structure, needs to be operationalized. And our focus is to operationalize that command to see to whatever components need to be plugged in underneath, whether it's from the infantry battalion or engineer capabilities or MI or CA, that we are able at the headquarters level to have a robust staff to be able to provide that C2 to the theater army.
Thanks. Mark.
For the 2nd Division, we're sort of focusing on foundational warfighting skills and working up. A key one for us is that information environment, and every commander at every level needs to be thinking and fighting in that information environment. So our challenge is to incorporate that into our tactical training and rehearsals at every level, every time, and then match that with physical capabilities that are coming online, such as counter-UAS.
Yeah, I would have to say that we, on the Army side, are going to transform along with the active Army, with the Army Transformation Initiative. I just came back from a conference, and all of the brigade combat teams within the Army National Guard are going to transform within the next 2 or 3 years. It has yet to be declared exactly when we will, but we think it's going to be quite early. So first of all, we focus on the federal mission, and then we want to transform and modernize along the same pace as the Army. And then we are already laid on to do another combat training center rotation with another National Guard brigade in 2028. And then we have other readiness partners that are going to participate also. I talked a little bit about the JPMRC, or the Joint Pacific Readiness CTC-like rotation that the 25th Division does with, ironically, our state partnership program in the Philippines and also here. And we're already laid in to do that, to look at that experimentation and evaluation that the 25th Division is doing. On the air side, we're already fully integrated. I have airmen that are currently deployed worldwide. They fly 5th generation fighters. They're fully integrated. So I believe that we're pretty much set up for that mission. Let me just caveat the reserve component force by saying that we focus on this federal mission because being proficient in that is what's necessary for the defense of our country. Some of those skill sets lend themselves to a domestic response capability. An example would be we train air crews to fight, fly, and fix in a variety of different weather environments. They can easily transition and do that to either evacuate personnel, bring much needed supplies, commodities, and material to an affected region, or fight wildland fires. So it's a symbiotic relationship between training for one, does not deplete for the other.
Okay, last question, knowing full well we have less than 5 minutes, and this is all for all of you as well, because this is always a question that comes up on numerous occasions, knowing that you have limited training days within your organization. So the question for all 4 of you is, how are you evolving training to ensure your units remain combat ready, especially when faced with limited and compressed training and limited resources compared to the active duty? So we'll start with you, Steve.
Okay, one word, predictability. We have to have quality plans that are well thought out because we don't have another day to come in to go do it. I talked about our ratio of part-time to full-time soldiers and airmen. So they make a commitment to their employees, to their families to be able to come in. We have to make sure that that training is well planned, it's resourced, it's thought out, and it's deliberate to achieve certain objectives so we don't have to keep doing it over and over again. It doesn't mean we're so rigid that we can't, respond or be flexible enough to an emergent opportunity that presents itself. But it does take a lot of planning up front, and we have to look out further, a little bit further than most forces, because then we have to compete for the fiscal fiscal resources to be able to make that a reality.
Mark.
Yeah, that most precious resource of time, so just eliminating wherever possible unnecessary overhead and bureaucracy so the soldiers can maximise the time in training is important. And the Australian Army has taken a lead from the US Army. I think it's the REAP program in the US Army. We've created a program called Program Ruthless, which is designed to cut red tape and bureaucracy so soldiers can focus on training. Probably the other 2 points are that every training activity we want to train at echelon, so every level of command involved in a training activity is being evaluated, and wherever possible that it's conducted with that idea of that this is a rehearsal, so every training activity a rehearsal.
Thanks. Catherine.
I would agree with General Logan, predictability, because for the Army Reserve soldier, we don't have 365 days to train. We have roughly 60 plus or minus in a year. So being able to forecast training and plan and prepare and then give the soldiers the opportunity to attend in coordination with their civilian employers is key for us. Thank you, sir.
Dean.
If I were to go back to my time as a brigade commander and a battalion commander, I think the focus for the Singapore Army really is on the competency and competence of our junior leaders. Because we have national servicemen leading national servicemen, they could be peers in basic training, they could be peers in school. It's very important that we equip our junior leaders with not just the hard skills, but also the soft skills to lead the soldiers into operations, into training, and even on a day-to-day basis. So we spend a lot of time to the extent that we'll call back the junior leaders a few days earlier before the in-camp training, in the active units during full-time training. We spend a good period of time just training the junior leaders so that they can go into their platoons, into their sections, confident and equipped with the skills to lead the soldiers well.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know, right, here at U.S. Army Pacific, our motto is one team, not 2 teams, not 3 teams, not 4 armies, right? It's one team. And so this proves today that the one team is not just simply a slogan, right? It's the only way we will meet our shared security challenges in this vast and vital region. So this panel has been a living embodiment of that ethos of one team. So without further ado, please give a warm applause to our panel members. and please enjoy the rest of LANPAC and enjoy Hawaii. Aloha and mahalo. Thank you.
What a great discussion. Great way to kick off our 3rd and final day here in Hawaii at LANPAC. Please give our panel another round of applause. Okay, we're going to take a short break. Please don't go too far. We ask that you be back in here at 1100 for our next keynote speaker, General Ronald Clark. Please be back here at 1100 for our next keynote.